Kay Spears has been a colleague here in the Genealogy Center for a number of years. She is really an asset to our team. She coordinates a lot of scanning projects with our volunteers, but more importantly for all of us, she is really sharp on photographs, preservation, scanning, fixing, if you will, fixing photographs, tears, spots, etc., and is always willing to muse about something and offer a piece of advice. She's done a number of these workshops over her tenure here, so really excited to welcome you, Kay, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kurt. Tonight, as Kurt mentioned, we're going to look at color photographs and how unique they are, as all photographs are, but color photographs present a number of different problems, and we're going to look a little bit at those tonight. So I'm going to open up my first photograph that we're going to look at. And if you were with me last week, you will know that when I open it, the photograph has a tendency to go up in the corner. And that seems to be a bug with the version I have, which is 2018, because when I tried out the 2019, that did not happen. Also, if you'll notice this week around the image, I have a ruler, and that is available right here in the View drop-down box where it says Rulers. So those were a couple of things that I added to it. And in case you're interested, I think there was a comment last week about floating. And this is when I go like this is floating. That is down here in the preferences under general. And it's right here. It says allow floating in expert mode. And while you're in here changing things, you might also want to check the zoom with the scroll wheel. So that's in your preferences. So let's look at this image. And this image may look different on your different laptops because of however much light you have in your room. If there's light coming in through a window, if you've got the lid tilted one way or another, that makes a difference on how things are viewed on your laptop. But I am going to try to do some of these strong enough so that you can see the results. So here is my first one, and it is what I would call faded. It also has a bit of a tint to it. Now, I start out all of my color photographs just like I do my black and white. I always start with the automatic level. So let's start with the automatic level. And on my screen and on your screen, you should see that the pink has disappeared. And now we have a black car and sort of a pink coat and some other interesting colors. So that is just by hitting the levels.
So, Kay?
Yes.
Before you get too far, someone had asked a question about versions of Adobe, since you had mentioned versions
Yes.
as a part of what you were doing. And the question was, how did Adobe 2019 compare to your 2018? And the participant, she mentioned that she'll soon be moving from 2015 to 2019. Are a lot of the features that you're showing going to be different?
Okay, every year, because Adobe signed some kind of a contract when they first came along in 2004 that said that every year they have to get a new version out. So every year since 2004, they've been giving us a new version. Sometimes those new versions they've tweaked more than others. And they've improved them more than others. Now, when I did the quick look at the 2019, I didn't see anything that looked too much different. But I think that they've got another one. I think well, maybe that's the last one. I'm not sure. But
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, so let's go back in here and we're going to bring up the levels. And this is the dialog box for levels. Now I'm going to show you that in the color photographs, sometimes these little eyedroppers do amazing things. And I'm going to start out with the gray eyedropper, which is the one that you always start out with. And I'm going to find a neutral area in this photograph. And I'm going to click it. And mine changed to sort of a bluish kind of image. Now I'm going to go to the black one. And I'm going to look for a dark area. I have this shadow here or this shadow here around the hood of the car, but I'm going to go with this area. And if this works, you should see a very interesting pop. So I got quite an image on my computer of this. Now, I know this photograph. That's me and my family. I know the color of that jacket that I have on. It's not a magenta jacket. And this is where you start coming into issues with color. Even though I have this nicely enhanced, I still need to do some adjustments. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to go into the adjust color and I'm going to go into hue and saturation. And I am very gently going to move this hue bar over to my right. And my jacket is starting to change color. So I've got a different color on my jacket, which should be maybe a reddish color now. I'm going to add more of the color by playing with the saturation. And you see that it's getting even redder. And now I'm going to introduce some darkness into it by going the other way. So you don't have to do a whole lot with these bars, just some gentle touches, moving them whichever way. And this is when you need to, when you're doing these things, when you're learning, you really need to play with these bars to see what they do. So we're going to say, okay. And we're going to do a close-up. And I'm going to show you that when I enhanced it, it did bring up some other problems. It has something with the blue. There are these blue speckles on it all over the place. There also appear to be cracks in the photograph itself. And those are some of the things that would take you a long time to fix. They are fixable, but for one photograph, you would be spending quite a long time trying to figure out how to fix it. You could clone it, which we're going to talk about next week. Or you could do some painting, which I don't like to do when I'm restoring photographs, but that is a option. And then the sky has some problems up here. So all of those things would need to be addressed. So that's one way to fix a colored photograph. So let's shut this one down and bring up another one. So, as I said earlier, all photographs are unique. They all have unique problems. And this one has a different problem than the last one.
So, Kay,
Yes.
before you get started on this one, we do have a question.
Yes.
Could you use the Colorize feature first in MyHeritage, the website, and then tweak the photograph in Adobe?
No, let me show you what that would do. So if I brought that up, and well, I'm not familiar with MyHeritage's colorizing, because on here, when you have colorizing, like this is their Colorize. If I hit the Colorize button, it changes that to a flat, green, blue. There's not any of the other options that are in there. So that what she suggested probably would not work on that. Usually in Adobe, you use the Colorize if you have a black and white photograph and you want to add color to the black and white. So I don't know enough about MyHeritage's colorizing button.
Sure, and it's a relatively new feature of MyHeritage, and the technology they use, I believe, is proprietary, but it does some wonderful things with images. So I totally appreciate your answer. We probably just haven't had time to play with it.
Right. Yeah.
So thanks for your question, Robin. And one of our participants just recommended try it with a copy and see what happens.
Yeah. There are a number of other products, GIMP, for instance, which is similar to Adobe Photoshop, and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
It has almost every single thing that Adobe has, except they're just arranged differently and they're in different places. And some of them are called different things. So it's a pretty good product if you want Adobe and you don't want to pay for it. So.
Sure.
And okay, so let's go back here. So we're going to start like we always do with the automatic level. Now, the automatic level really popped this photograph, what I call pop. But if you'll notice, it didn't do anything. Even though it made the contrast darker and the brightness better, there's still a color cast to it. Around the edges, there's still these, on my computer, it's kind of a yellow, and the house is kind of a yellow. So here's another thing that you can do if you're having this kind of luck with your photographs. I'm going to go back. What you need to do is turn on your crop button. You want to get rid of that nasty edge, that white that's part of the photograph. Because when Adobe looks at this, They don't look at just the image, they look at everything that you scanned. So you need to crop that white off. Now look what happens when I do the automatic level. That yellow cast is gone, and I've got a photograph that probably is pretty close to what the original might have looked like. So we've got it this far. So let's do a little bit more tweaking by going back to this colors. So we have this dialog opened again. And it says over here in the drop-down box, it says master. But if you click on that, you get other colors. Let's click on the red. Now, I want you to look at that rose there, and we're going to move the hue and saturation slider, and I might exaggerate it just so you can see what's going on, because it might be too subtle for you to actually see that rose. So I'm going to probably exaggerate it just a little bit more, but you should be seeing when I move this back and forth, mine went green. But if I move it the other way, it should be getting a little bit of a red to it, or a magenta. And I'm going to increase the saturation. So you see I'm affecting the color of the reds. These plants down here, they're changing too. And I'm going to make it lighter, or darker. So let's go in and look at the greens, because I want to do something with the plant. I am going to move it toward the yellow, the hue. And I'm going to move it quite. Now you should have just seen something happen there. I am going to move the saturation button. And you should have seen something going on in here. And I'm going to make it darker. So you can manipulate these colors. You can also go over here to the Lasso Brush. I'm going to zoom in on my computer has a purple rose. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to draw with my cursor around this rose, or whatever. I don't know if this is a rose. I don't think it's a rose. So I have selected that rose, and I'm going to go back in and adjust the color on it. Just the rose. So it's starting to change color. Starting to get a kind of a reddy. So I've got the rose, or the flower, adjusted to what I'm happy with. So maybe I want to adjust some of the other things. I'm going to close this down. And then back out. I'm going to click where my select is. I'm going to click on my cursor. I'm going to click right, bring up a dialog box, and I'm going to select the inverse. And now you'll notice that there's some dotted lines going around the image itself and the rose. So everything that's outside of that flower is going to be affected by what I do. The flower that I just adjusted will not. So I'm going to go back in. To to the color. And we're going to adjust around in here. So let's go back and look at the greens again. And let's move some of those greens over to the yellow again. And the rose, or the flower, is not changing. So I'm going to do the yellow. See what we can get with the yellow. Let's go this way. And hopefully you're seeing everything but the flower change. There we go. So that tool is something else you can use to adjust colors, and then you can be really focused in on certain things to adjust just that color. So that's that. Any questions on this image?
None have come into the chat. Okay, I would just have to make the very pedestrian observation that it kind of looks like magic.
It does. It is. It's fun. You can do when you're just starting, when you're learning. It's always better to really experiment with all of these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some really wonderful tutorials out there too. Google or YouTube has some great tutorials. If you're trying to figure out how to do something. So I do recommend watching those.
Good deal. That's a good piece of advice.
Okay. Now, we're going to switch gears here a little. If I'm assuming that I have a lot of genealogists out there, and I bet a number of you have had something that you've tried to read. This happens to be a Civil War diary, and actually in better condition than a lot of them, because you can, if I would zoom in on these, you can read some of this stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
We do have a question that just came in about the last image that you were on.
Yeah.
And it specifically asked, how did you get the shadow off of her face in that previous picture?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I wasn't trying to do that. Let me see what we got. I think that maybe what happened, I'm not quite sure the shadow, unless you're referring to this.
Yeah.
It probably, well, I should have. I'm guessing that because I made it lighter, or because this took the cast off of here, and because I made it lighter or brighter, that the shadow disappeared. But I'm not sure what. I would imagine.
It did lighten up a little bit there.
Okay, I suspect that because her face, if I zoom in on the face, you'll notice that it's kind of pinkish. And maybe when I was manipulating some of the other colors, that the reds disappeared, maybe, or magentas or whatever color is causing all of this. And you notice as I zoom in on these pixels that they're not all just one color. So
Right.
whatever I do is going to affect whatever color it is, like all these magentas that are in here. So that would be my guess, not knowing, would be my guess that somehow I manipulated the color out of there that was creating the shadow.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so we're back to this. And there are a number of different things that you can do with journals or diaries or letters, because there are always a number of things that are wrong with them. Some of them aren't flat. Some of them, when you scan them, have little ripples in them, and all those ripples create different problems. You can, as always, enhance with the level. And it will make things darker so that you can read it. Now, sometimes you have areas like this where the text is lighter than the rest. And like we did with the previous drawing or the previous photograph, you can select that area and you can layer copy. You're going to have your layer over here in this box or in the layer palette. Then you're going to go up here and we're going to open the levels. And since we are making sure that we have checked the correct layer, we are going to move the slide box and see if it works. So we are getting a little bit darker. Our goal is to make it so that we can read what it says. If you'll notice, it is different. There's a different color from the rest. So, it depends on what you want to do with these journals as to how you fix it. But if what you need to do is to read it and write and transcribe it, this is one of the ways that you can do so that you can read what it says. There are more ways to fix it. Revert. Now, in this version of Adobe, you have a smart fix. The smart fix is in other versions. It's in some older versions. I checked Adobe Elements 9. It was in there, and also the Adjust Smart Fix was in there too. So I think that one has been with Adobe for quite a while. And when you click on that, this happens. And it sort of looks the same, but you still have the option then of selecting that area that's not quite like the rest. So let's look at another option for trying to fix these journals. And I think of all the things that I've ever tried to fix, the journal and a diary and a letter are some of the more challenging things to try to correct. So the Auto Smart Tone. Now this one is not in some of the older versions. But this one is one of the newer ones, and it's, I think it's quite handy. So we bring it up, and what you get is a screen that looks like this, and it lets you select how you want the image to look. It gives you a preview, and you can click, and this is the preview, and if you click on each one of those, it will change that. And you can select the one that you think is the best. So we're going to say it's going to be between this one and that one. And I don't really see too much of a difference, so I'm going to go with this one. Say okay. So then we have this image. And this is still there, but you can start reading. Then all you have to do is learn how to read cursor and try to find out. Some of this writing is really hard to decipher. Okay, this is a Civil War. This person shot 2 of his fingers off, but the weather is pleasant. So you do run across some interesting things when you do journals.
So, Kay,
Yes.
we have kind of an aspiration maybe from one of our participants. She writes in chat that I hope she can make words from old vital records, like perhaps German script, that is too glossy and unable to decipher the letters and then words. Is there any particular treatment that you're doing to this letter that would help with glossy?
No, I don't think so. There might be something. I think it would depend. Why is it glossy again? It's the paper is glossy.
Yeah, she just made reference to German script, etc. That if the copy is too shiny or too glossy, that the ink's too wide. Maybe not glossy, but too wide, too gloppy, I guess. I misread it. It's gloppy, not glossy, but gloppy, she wrote.
Okay. I'm not quite sure.
So like fat letters maybe that have bled together.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting project, and it sounds like without really looking at it to see what the problem is, you would probably have to do some work with zooming in really close and looking at each one of those letters to see what the problem is. I'm not sure if there would be a way to make that happen, especially in the Creative Suite. They have a more expensive version of Adobe Photoshop. In that version is something called Threshold, and it changes the images to black and white, but it's a different kind of black and white. And that might help you if you can get a program Okay, let me see. Okay, so this is threshold. And you can only put threshold over here and elements above just the layer. It affects the layer here. So if you have more than one layer, that's a problem. But this might help. Without looking at it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Adjust the writing itself with this.
Would this also work? One of our participants, Kay, asked, can you get rid of bleed through from the back? Would what you're doing now also help get rid of bleed through from the back?
Well, it might. Bleed through is a problem. And the best way to help with the bleed through is when you scan it, you put a piece of construction paper over it, over the back of it when you're scanning, so that the light doesn't go through the paper. And that helps with some of the bleed through. But let me show you.
So before you move on, Kay, we do have someone asked if you could remind us again the tool option you were just using for that Civil War letter.
The black and white one. That would be the threshold tool. It's only over here. Over here, it's up here in this thing that looks like a sort of a yin yang, and it's right here, the threshold. And you can adjust things for maybe a clearer image. Now, see, this one's got bleed through.
Right.
But this layer here affects the layers that are underneath it.
Thank you.
And threshold's a little bit more advanced. And it's one of those things you use last minute when nothing else works. Okay, so this one has a bleed through. As I'm getting closer. And there's a really long way that you can get rid of it, is if you highlight or if you select all of these text and move them to another layer and then delete the layer underneath and put a new layer in, you'll get rid of the bleed throughs, but that's a hard way to do it. So there's the auto correction, and it still has the bleed through. However, I can read it. It's not bad. You could, if you really don't want this, if it's interfering with it, you could maybe try to clone some of that out. But that, again, is a long way of doing something. As far as I know, there's no quick way of getting rid of that bleed. Just in the beginning, try not to, if you put a construction paper down, it will help. So, and this one is the Civil War. You know, even the photograph from the front page is bleeding through.
So that you just provided a nice tip, Kay, for the scanning of the original.
Right.
If all you have is the image, then they would need to deploy the things that you have just been talking about.
Yeah, there's not a good way to get rid of that when you get it. You can just try to enhance it as best you can. So you could, there's just no easy way because the writing is so small. And even if I tried to select it, that's not going to work.
Mhm.
So are there any more questions?
Not at the present time.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on to just colorizing a black and white.
Oh, hey, Kay.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I've got a tip that probably accidentally came to me privately.
Okay.
It says, writing on a legal pad or other paper, you can copy the doc, then use a yellow highlighter. Somehow it makes the writing easier to read. Maybe this could be applied to this.
Okay, say that again.
So if you're writing on a legal pad or paper
Uh-huh.
and you copy the document and then use a yellow highlighter, sometimes that makes the writing easier to read. So if you
Oh.
make a photocopy of the document and then use the highlighter, you might be able to pull out the text too.
Oh, that could be good. That'd be a good idea. I've never tried that. That would be an experiment to do.
Well, it worked decades ago when you had poor microfilm. You would put a yellow piece of transparency on the microfilm that would cover up the white viewing surface, and oftentimes old handwriting would pop. So maybe there's something about that yellow there.
Let's do an experiment here. I don't know if it will work, but this is what we do. We experiment. So, okay, I'm going to make a new layer. And I am going to I don't know if this is going to work, but it was an idea. Okay, I put this new layer that was the same color as the paper scan. And then I put the layer here and I did a little bit of a transparency on it. And it did filter out some of the bleed, but there is still some bleed that's showing through on this. So that's maybe a solution also.
Someone made the comment, just ask the library to rescan the document.
Well, that's good. That's good. Let's see if this does anything. Okay, I just
Sure.
darkened the bottom layer, and that did bring the text out a little bit more.
Someone asked if you could make the background yellow.
The background yellow? Okay. Let's turn this off. So the background yellow. Well, you mean without, okay. Not very good. Does that look yellow to you guys?
Sort
Oops.
of.
Sort of. So that's a yellow. Let's turn this back on. Maybe. The problem with the background, when on the layer palette, the whole thing is a background, not just the supposed paper. The print would be part of the background too. So those are some options.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see if this does anything. I think that this is an interesting option with adding a layer of a different color up there. It does seem to want to get rid of some of that. So that could be something to look at. So,
Thanks, Kay.
yep. Okay, and then I want to show one last trick before we open some questions. I said earlier about the black and white photographs. Okay, this is a black and white photograph. And by the way, if anybody is interested in historical photographs, there is a Hollywood photographer by the name of George Earl, I believe, who did some wonderful photographs with light and dark. If you ever want to look at some really great photographs. Okay, so this is a grayscale photograph. In order for me to do anything with color, I need to change it. So I just very easily change it to RGB. So now I can do things with color with this image. And I can go back to the hue and saturation. And now I can colorize. And I can make it any color, any flat color that I want. So you can do a number of things with color on your black and whites. So that's how, with Adobe, when you say colorize, that's how you colorize in Adobe. Any questions?
None yet in chat, but sometimes it takes a moment or two for people to key in what they're interested in asking. Someone made the comment, Kay, it looks a bit like just a filter. Is there
Yes.
a way to adjust color on her dress or something else? Just on her dress.
Well, yeah, you would, there's not much of her dress, so it would be real easy. You would just select that area with your little select. With my little lasso, draw around there,
So
change that color.
cool. So we have a suggestion from one of our participants. Can you color her lips red?
Yeah, you can do the same thing. You would
Okay.
need to go around there and select it, and you could change it to red. You can do a lot of that. And we're going to go over some of the fun things, I call fun, in the last session that I do.
Last one in the series.
Yes, we're going to do some interesting things with some photographs.
So another question has come in, and I'm going to mispronounce the word likely. Can you explain OPACITY with layers?
Oh, okay, the opacity?
Opacity, yeah.
Sure, okay, let me do something here so you can see it. Okay, I'm going to go over here to my layer palette. I'm going to drag this over here, drop it. So if you look over here in your layer palette, you've got two layers. And the top one is the one we're going to make, or we're going to dial down the opacity. And what it does is you will start seeing the bottom image showing through. So that's what the opacity is. It's just the opaqueness of an image. And so this is one of the things you can do if you've got more than one layer, is that you can start playing with that opaqueness. So that's opaque. That's opaqueness or transparency or whatever you want to call it. And you can take it down really quite a bit. So that the bottom layer is showing through.
Mm-hmm. You got a comment that I love that.
Oh, yes, yes. There's lots more you can do. But, yeah, and you know, this what I just did, it comes in handy when you've got family photographs and you want to put like a collage or something together of your family photographs. There are a lot of different things you can do to create something that looks really nice. You can resize these photographs. You can put a whole bunch of them together. You don't have to put one on top of the other one like this. And you can make collages with putting more than just two photographs on it in there.
Cool, cool. We've had a question come in, Kay, that I'm going to take the lead on, but certainly would welcome your thoughts, ideas, and comments. The question is a two-parter. What does the ACPL or Genealogy Center use this software for? Are you retouching photographs on a regular basis? So not to be confusionist to our participant, the answer is yes. So what does the ACPL or Genealogy Center use the software for? Yes. And are you retouching photographs on a regular basis? Let me explain. So the Archivist Library inside of me is going to pop out here. When we have a manuscript collection or manuscripts that have photographs or a photograph collection, our archival scans are, as Kay mentioned last week and mentions in other workshops, they're at least 300 DPI, uncompressed TIFF images, and no retouch. We don't fix tears. We don't remove blotches, splots. We don't fix those Instamatic photographs. We just capture the image as it is in a high enough resolution that we can preserve it. When we go to use it for presentations, if we want to grab an image that is ours, that we own the intellectual property rights to, and we want to use it on a report cover, or we want to use it in a PowerPoint presentation, and we want to fix it up, if you will, then we deploy software like what you, Kay, are talking about this evening. But we do not retouch, fix, or in any way alter the original archival scan. We take a copy of that scan if we have the right to do that, and we can do some of these overlays, we can fix, we can colorize, etc. So any comments you wanted to make, Kay?
No, that's about it. There's a difference in my mind between retouch and restore. In my own collection, I have all of my images scanned, and I haven't done anything to them. I have not retouched them or restored them, the originals. I have taken some of them out and restored some of them to what I think is what they probably look like when they were first taken.
But you did that to a copy, right?
But I did that to a copy. I have not, because I always want my archival copy to be not touched. And so you always make whatever you're working on, for whatever reason, you always use a copy. And I like to use the word restore.
Okay.
Restore it to what you think it looked like to begin with. There is a difference between touching something up and restoring it to what it looked like to begin with, before it was ripped in two or before it was scribbled on by a pencil.
Good point. Very good point. Someone made the comment that the last thing you showed was great for ghost imaging, which brings to mind a very famous photograph we have in our Lincoln collection called the Spirit Photograph, where it looks like the spirit of Abraham Lincoln is standing behind Mary Todd Lincoln. It's on our Lincoln website. And so back in the 19th century, people were already doing this.
Right. Yeah, and as long as there have been photographs, people have been retouching them. And I don't know how, because they did it in the dark rooms.
Right.
And so that was quite a talent to retouch. Some of them you can tell that the photographer didn't really know how to retouch, but some of them are pretty amazing. They painted on them, they drew on them. The photographers did. So yeah, retouching's been around for a long time.
A question came in. I heard that your library uses Vivid Pix Restore. Is that correct? You want to take a first crack at that, Kay?
Well, okay, yes, we have that. We have it, and we have used it. I like it. It comes in handy in the case of the journals and the diaries. It's a really good way of fixing them so that you can read them, so you can transcribe them, and it fixes them fast. You can go through 200 pages with Vivid Pix. It is a good tool for enhancing, if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You may take it.
So, perfect answer. Thank you. So we had another participant ask, you don't make adjustments for scan issues. So I think that's referring to our previous conversation about keeping the original scan. You don't make adjustments for scan issues.
No. Now, I do, there's a problem when if you've got newspapers and stuff that you're scanning, because there's a pattern that develops because of the paper quality and the screens that they used to use when they developed things. And there's a setting on the scanner itself called a D-screen, and it softens that look up. That would be the only thing that I would know that is possible to do, but usually we just do, we do scans. And that would be the only thing that I would think that you would maybe want to look at what the photograph looks like with that D-screener on. It might help get a better image.
Okay. So we had a comment that says, thanks for your review of Photoshop. Hope you will cover more tools in later webinars. And I think you will, won't you?
Yes. The next time, yeah. Next week is one of the tools that, if you're really going to restore your images that have a lot of things on them, like scribbles and cracks and bacteria that's growing on it that you scanned, we're going to look at the clone tools. We're going to look, there are a number of different clone tools, and we're going to look at what each one of them does next week.
Nice setup. Very nice setup. So that's next week. And after next week, there'll be 2 more sessions in July. So
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like, another question has come in. How do you make a color image black and white? Is the process more complex than just changing from RBG to grayscale?
No, it's not complex at all. Let me open a color one. Here's a color one. So you could do it that way. You could go in. I lost it. It's going to say, do you want to discard that information? Yes. And there I've got my black and white.
Excellent.
Yep.
So another comment has come in, a request. I'd like Kay to enhance, restore, repair my images. It will take me forever to learn as much about the software as what you know. So there you go, Kay.
Oh, thanks. But you got to get, I love Adobe Photoshop. There are other Photoshop programs that I really like, but I've been working with Adobe Photoshop for a long time. And it is something that it makes me happy when I'm working in it. But it also can be very frustrating, and some things that you do in it take a long time. But you just have to keep getting in there, and I like to call it playing with it to find out what it does. And it does amazing things.
I like that piece of advice. I think that's the 3rd or 4th time, Kay, this evening you said, go in and play with it.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we want to do perfect right away, and we really get to the end result faster if we take a little time to play. So you've offered that advice several times this evening, so thank you for that. Other comments or questions? We have a couple thank yous that have come in. Other questions that people want to key into the chat? Someone asked about whether previous webinars will be posted, and our colleague Allison has already responded in chat that yes, they'll be posted to YouTube at a later date. Is a question just popped in, Kay. Is there a better choice of tools for selecting areas on prints? I'm not totally sure what this is referring to, but is there
Well, I think they're probably referring to my wonderful handling of the cursor with the lasso. There is and Allison mentioned it the last time, there is a stick, I'm not sure what the term is, that you can draw on the screen to select things, but you have to have the right screen, you have to have the right equipment to do that. There are some other select tools up here that I haven't talked about, and I'm going to talk more about them when I get into some of the cloning things. If you look, I just clicked on one of my select tools, and down here, there are a number of options that are available on the quick or on the selection. And this one here is called the quick selection. And if I drag it, it's going to be interesting to do. I'm going to turn this off. If I drag it, I can do this with it. And then I can go back down here and take this part off. So that's another select tool. But they're all operated with your cursor or with your mouse.
mouse?
And so a mouse is not the best drawing tool.
Okay.
They're basically digital pens. You can
Yeah.
find them online, but they get pricey.
Yeah, and I believe your screen has to be capable of allowing that to happen.
Yep, you have to have like a tablet of some sort that you can actually draw
Right.
on.
Yeah.
Very good. Someone made a comment that they're looking forward to next week's class already. So
Oh, good.
stay healthy, Kay.
Okay, we love our clones.
Very good. Very good.
Hey, Kurt,
Yes.
what's next Tuesday's program? I believe you are the star of that show.
Well, I'm on anyway, Allison. So I don't want to steal any of Kay's thunder, but as has been our practice for a while now, we have a Tuesday afternoon virtual program and a wonderful Thursday evening virtual program. So before we get to Kay's next adventure in cloning, I'll be presenting a fun little, I think, but important talk. We've titled it Beyond Hatched, Matched, and Dispatched, Methods for Finding Our Family Stories. So the whole focus of that's going to be, okay, so we find birth, marriage, and death records, and maybe some census records, but what else? How do we put sort of the stories into those few facts? How do we really find information, data about our family stories? So that'll be next Tuesday afternoon at 2:30, and then Kay will be back with us a week from this evening.
And if there's something that you would like me to do next week we can always experiment like we did with the paper.
Very good. A comment just came in regarding heavy ink, gloppy ink in old records to make more legible to read letters so we can read the words. Next time, could you show us what we might be able to do with Photoshop? Thank you.
I'm not sure.
I would like to better understand how to use brush size is another comment that has come in.
Oh, okay. Brush size as far as, because the brush is right here. And you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. And the brush does a number of different things. You can paint with the brush. Or you can even do what's called masking, which we'll go into later with the brush.
Yeah. So the follow-up comment was the person never knows what size to choose.
Oh, okay. Okay, you choose the size of the brush. This is going to be a wishy-washy answer. It depends on what you're doing as to the size of the brush that you're using. Sometimes you need the brush very small because you're doing detailed work and you need to zoom in to whatever it is that you're doing and use that brush there. But then sometimes you want to do things that are bigger. So you would, so it's, you use a variety of brush sizes depending on what you're doing.
Okay. And a follow-on comment was made, sometimes the brush is more crisp and other times more
Yes.
blurry.
Yes. And there again, you choose that depending on what you're doing. For instance, when you're cloning, you're going to change the size of the brush and the size of the hardness depending on what it is that you're cloning. And you would do the same thing with whether you're painting or what you want to do. You would use a softer brush if you want things to blend better.
Okay, thank you for that. She commented back, that's exactly what I need to understand better. So good deal, good deal. Well, as we're, the question came in, where's the link to sign up for Kurt's session? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, if you go to events and pick next Tuesday's session, there will be a registration link in there. So genealogycenter.org, slide across the top navigation bar to the events button, click on that, pick the date, and click on the program.
That's exactly right.
Okay, as we're finishing up this evening, any other questions that you want to put into the chat box? Thanks so much, Kay, again, for your time and your expertise. And thank you for our participants that have joined us this evening.